It's my birthday. Well, not the day I'm recording this, and maybe even not the day you're watching this, but if you're watching this on the day that's released, it is my birthday. I'm 30 years old. Happy birthday to me. So what better way to celebrate than to talk about myself? I want to tell you my 30 favorite movies of all time. And just a quick note, I'm ordering these in alphabetical order, so this isn't a ranking of 1 through 30. I just thought it'd be easy to group them all in one big list and go through it that way. So let's get to it, but before we do, don't forget to like and subscribe. 500 Days of Summer, released in 2009, comes at the end of a decade of a lot of rom-coms. Some good, some not so good, but this one definitely stands out in its premise and the way it's executed. The non-linear storytelling is always interesting to me. The soundtrack is top tier, and the chemistry between the two leads is one of the best on-screen I've ever seen. Avengers Endgame is probably a lame pick, but I mean, I can't not pick this movie. I grew up with the MCU starting in high school, and so through high school, my college years, and into being a young adult, I grew up with this franchise, and I will say I have not loved its post-Endgame. But what Endgame managed to do is unlike any other films before it. And yeah, you could say Infinity War is the same way, but it's biased. I'm sorry, I just like Endgame a little bit better. Baby Driver is one I'm not proud of because the cast has turned out to be rather problematic, but I cannot think of a more creative way to tell this action story. I love Edgar Wright, I'm a big fan of a lot of his work, and this movie just describes him in every single way possible. Back to the Future to me is always the best example of how a movie should be paced. It's such a perfectly paced movie and has such a tight script. There's not a moment of screen wasted. The whole trilogy is amazing, obviously the first one being the best, and it's one of the greatest adventure movies you could ever watch. I love Chicago, and so that's probably why I love the Blues Brothers. I grew up with this movie. I love seeing the Chicago landscape within it, and the musical numbers are top tier. It's incredible that this movie started out from SNL because you cannot imagine SNL doing anything remotely as cool as this today. Breakfast Club is the ultimate bottle movie. I always love when stories are told in one single location, and this just happens to be one of the first movies I ever saw that did that. It's definitely not the first to do it, but it's one of the best executions of it, and I'm convinced that every single teenager needs to see this movie. It's also very 80s, which is always a great time. But if you want a good look at the 90s, you gotta watch Clueless. I'm not saying Clueless is an accurate representation of the 90s, but it's definitely the most obnoxious representation of it. In fact, it's so obnoxiously 90s that it probably felt outdated if you were to watch it in 1995. But it is so funny, and Alicia Silverstone should have won an Oscar for her role. I was 16 years old when The Dark Knight came out. What am I supposed to say? It was summer. It was awesome. I went again and again and again. It was a great time. I just never knew that would hold such a high standard for superhero movies that would almost never be met. Heath Ledger, nothing more to say. Star Wars has been very much watered down over the past few years. Let's not skate around that fact. But The Empire Strikes Back is not only a great Star Wars movie, it is a great movie, period. It's iconic, and I love when a movie's bold enough to end on the note that it ended on. This is probably one of the top movies I cannot wait to show my kids someday. I know I'm not doing a ranking, but this right here is my #1 favorite movie of all time. The script is flawless. I am convinced this is the best screenplay ever. The characters are so fleshed out. Everyone is so perfectly written. The way that this screenplay introduces you new information so you can figure out what's going on, it is amazing. Get Out is a great example of how horror and comedy share a lot when it comes to timing and execution. It's a great social commentary and shows you that horror can be held to a higher standard. And it was probably top 5 theater experiences I've ever had. The first time I saw Good Will Hunting, I was very young, and I was convinced that this was like the greatest movie ever. Maybe not my favorite, but just like execution, performances, I was like, wow, so I guess this is what perfect movies are like. In fact, even to this day, when I think of great drama performances, Robin Williams and Matt Damon are always the default that come up in my head. Ah, Rod, I still laugh every time I watch this movie, and I've seen it a lot. Either you like it or you don't, but you cannot convince me that this movie didn't help lead the way for internet meme culture and where we are today with it. I can't think of a tradition I love more than watching It's a Wonderful Life every holiday season. Sure, the story is a little cliche at this point, but only because it was so good at the time that everyone had to copy it. James Stewart is definitely one of my favorite actors of all time. The fact that you get 2 distinct movies within Jurassic Park is incredible. It starts off with this movie about awe and wonder. It is beautiful seeing these dinosaurs brought back to life, and then the second half hits and it's a horror movie mixed in with social commentary on theme parks and capitalism. It's a great time. Steven Spielberg knows how to build a spectacle. La La Land is a musical that pays tribute to old Hollywood. I'm a sucker for it. The soundtrack, the colors, it brings to life this story that shows various areas of show business, and it's always a great watch. Lady Bird. I love coming of age stories, and when you mix that with 2000s nostalgia and having a Dave Matthews Band song as the main plot point, you know I'm gonna love it. Visually, one of the most beautiful anime movies you can ever look at. The voice acting cannot be matched, and the soundtrack is still killer to this day. While Lion King may have some of the best animated visuals, Mad Max Fury Road definitely has the best visuals, period. This movie is proof that all you need is some practical effects and a clear vision, and you can make a great action film. Julie Andrews is Queen, and Mary Poppins is just the most magical character I have ever seen, and she's the only character I had my picture with when I went to Disney World in 2017. Like just a bunch of dudes jumping through chimneys? Yes, please. Ocean's 11 was the heist movie of a generation. With a star-studded cast, such an interesting plot, I'm still blown away to this day of how they got away with it. Parasite winning the Oscar is one of my favorite movie memories pretty much ever. The way that this movie builds tension while also saying a lot of interesting things about wealth versus poverty. Another just incredible first watch that I wish I could experience again. Playtime is my most recent addition to this list, as I just saw it a couple months ago, but I was absolutely blown away. There's really not a plot to it. It's just a lot of visual gags, but it is so funny, clever. I get so lost in this world, and I cannot take my eyes off the screen when I watch this film. Psycho, I think, is the best horror movie of all time. The original Scream Queen herself, one of the best villains ever to hit the screen. I mean, this dude literally couldn't act in any other roles because he was so iconic in this movie. It's perfect. It is the perfect horror movie, and I will always love it. Edgar Wright makes the list 2 times. I know Scott Pilgrim's a basic pick. Look, I love it. I can't help it. It's colorful, it's funny, it's charming, and I'm always blown away of how many A-listers were in this movie before they were A-listers. This is awkward. I'm in post and realize I didn't talk about The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. I promise it's on my list. I don't know how I missed it, but I feel like people are coming around to this, as a lot would agree this is one of the most underrated movies critically. You can't tell me that's not a great time traveling the world vicariously with Ben Stiller. Growing up, I was never sure if Shrek was actually good or if it was just nostalgic, but after watching it recently, I'm gotta say, it holds up and is one of the best anime movies of all time. With good commentary on animated movies, which is crazy. Not too crazy once you realize the history of Shrek and the kind of feud that some of the people had there with Disney, but it's still just as funny. I can quote the entire movie in one of the best soundtracks ever, probably right after 500 Days of Summer. The Social Network is right up there in my top 5 scripts of all time. Aaron Sorkin is very hit or miss for me, but when he hits hard, and The Social Network, I think, is his best script. It's tight and engaging, and Trent Reznor with the score, yes please. I know with Toy Story it's always an argument between the 3 which is the best one, but the first one to me is just the original. It's the first one I saw, and I think it still holds up as being absolutely delightful. It created a whole new world of where animation could go, and it is still just a charming story about friendship. Whiplash is not a story about friendship. In fact, it's probably the opposite. Also, my second Damien Chazelle movie on this list, which is pretty cool, and I cannot believe he made Whiplash as young as he did, with one of the best performances in a supporting role that I have ever seen on screen. Whiplash is a tough movie for me to revisit, but when I do, I'm absolutely blown away at what I am seeing on the screen. So there you go, my 30 favorite movies of all time. What of this list do you like? What am I just off on and is actually not a great movie? I want to hear it. I want to hear it all. Wish me happy birthday, by the way. 30 is a big deal, I think. A lot of cool things coming from this channel for the next 30 years, so don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.